This movie had one of the hardest jobs imaginable, somehow turning one of the most famous people who ever lived into an actual character. Someone who stopped feeling like a human being to the public a long time ago, who exists in people's minds as this enormous mythological thing that people either worship or use as a punchline, or honestly both. Welcome back to Mildly Overreacting. Today we're talking about Michael, the 2026 biopic. Let's get into it. The movie covers what you'd expect. Michael Jackson's life from his early days as a child performer with the Jackson 5, through his ascent as one of the biggest solo artists the world has ever seen, through the pressure and isolation and the surreal weight of being that famous for that long. The story hits all the big moments: Motown, Off the Wall, Thriller, the Moonwalk, the world tours, and it does all of this in a generally enormous scale. There's a version of this film that could have coasted entirely on spectacle and nostalgia, and honestly probably still make a lot of money. But they didn't do that, and I respect that. The production design, the concert recreations, the choreography, there are sequences on this film that were just amazing to watch on the big screen. But the movie's also generally trying to be about something. It's trying to tell you how it was really like for him. What did it cost? But here's the thing, even with all that ambition, the spectacle is not actually what makes the movie work. What makes the movie work is Jaafar Jackson. And I want to spend some real time on this because I think it's generally one of the most remarkable casting situations in recent film history. Jaafar Jackson is Michael Jackson's nephew. He's Jermaine Jackson's son. And he was cast to play his uncle in a major studio biopic, with all the pressure that comes with that. The pressure of the role, the pressure of representing his family, the pressure of trying to capture somebody that a billion people feel like they personally know. That is almost an absurd amount of weight to carry, especially for someone making their feature film debut. And he did great. There's something just amazing about watching a member of the Jackson family step into this role. Not in a cheap imitation way. It feels respectful, and it feels generally real. If you've seen even a single clip of this movie, then you know the dancing is extraordinary. The way Jaafar moves, the way he recreates Michael's physical presence and the specific way he occupies the stage, it's incredible. But what I think people are going to underestimate about this movie is how much the quieter scenes worked too. The moments where the movie slows down, where Michael is just a person in a room dealing with pressure he can't fully articulate, where the camera isn't doing anything flashy. Jaafar holds these moments. The performance never tips into caricature. It never feels like he's just doing an impersonation of a famous person. There's an actual human being underneath it, which is the whole point, and which is generally hard to pull off, has been turned into an icon so large that people stopped thinking of him as a person a long time ago. And I gotta say this again, the dancing was so good. Now, the second best performance in this movie is definitely Coleman Domingo as Joe Jackson, and I don't think it's particularly close. Coleman is one of the best working actors in Hollywood right now, and he absolutely does not waste the role. Joe Jackson as a character is complicated, to put it mildly. Demurring, brilliant, brutal, and somehow simultaneously the person really most responsible for creating Michael Jackson, the phenomenon, and one of the central sources of all of Michael Jackson's pain. Domingo plays that contradiction without ever making Joe feel like a simple villain. He's frightening in a way that real people can be frightening. Not because he's cartoonishly evil, but because you can understand the logic of his thinking, even as you watch it damage everything around him. The scenes between Michael and his father are generally the strongest dramatic scenes in this film. There's a real tension there, real history, real hurt. And both Jaafar and Domingo are locked in whenever they share the screen. The relationship with Joe is honestly one of the emotional anchors of this whole movie. It gives the movie somewhere to return when all the spectacular starts to blur. The concert footage is thrilling, but moments between this father and son is what actually sticks. Let's talk about the music, because obviously this is a Michael Jackson movie. They do a great job with the music in this movie, and that's not a surprise. But what the film does well is use the music to carry emotional scenes rather than just deploying it as nostalgia bait. When the right song hits at the right moment in the story, it lands differently than when you just hear it on the radio. There's context now, so there's weight. You're not just hearing Billie Jean anymore. The concert recreation sequences are spectacular, like genuinely. It's the kind of thing you can only really experience in theaters, which I think was clearly intentional. Now, fair criticism time. The movie is safe, there's no getting around it. The controversies that followed Michael Jackson in the later half of his career are absent. Not touched on, not gestured at, just not part of the film at all. And look, this is clearly a deliberate choice. The film has a specific focus and a specific version of his life that it wants to put on screen, and it commits to that. But it does mean that certain parts of the film can feel like they're operating in a bubble. If you go into it expecting the full picture, you won't get it. What I think the movie does less well, for reasons that have nothing to do with the controversies, is structure. This is a long life packed into a movie that's just over 2 hours, and it shows. The pacing can feel almost choppy, like a highlight reel that occasionally pauses long enough for you to catch your breath right before sprinting to the next famous moment. Some of the supporting relationships don't get the time they deserve. Some of the eras of Michael's life and career feel like they're just checking off a list. The movie's at its best when it slows down and lives in the moment. It doesn't always give itself permission to do that. But honestly, even with those criticisms, the movie still earns its emotional moments. The final act particularly has real weight. Here's what I keep coming back to. The reason I wanted to see this movie was very simple. I was curious how they were going to do this. How do you take someone as large as Michael Jackson and make him feel human again? The answer, it turns out, is you do it through mostly performance. You find someone who carries the right name, the right blood, the right instinct, and you put him in the middle of all of it and just trust him. And Jaafar Jackson turns out to be exactly the right person for an impossible job. Michael is not a perfect movie. It's not a complete movie, if we're being honest. There are definitely things left on the table, questions it doesn't want to ask, corners it isn't willing to look into. But it's a movie that tried to do something incredibly difficult, and more often than not, it succeeded. It's spectacular when it needs to be, quiet when it earns it, emotionally honest in ways that sneak up on you, and anchored throughout by a performance that I generally don't think anyone expected to be as good as it actually was. I gave it a 4 out of 5. If you haven't seen it, go see it right now. Alright, that's all I got for you guys today. If you've seen Michael, I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't seen it yet, let me know what movie I should cover next. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. It means the world to me.